This is the If More Let's Divide podcast.
Yo guys, what to go on? Welcome to the If More Let's Divide podcast. Another week, another episode. Like we always do when we come through. Bars, my nigga. Bars, my nigga. Chai Fred, what they go on?
What happened, man?
Chai, this is an interview that I've been trying to avoid for the longest time.
About
Because you know
since
what?
last season, actually.
Yeah, I've been trying to avoid it. You know why? Like I don't like work sometimes, you know. And with this guy, once we interview him, like we can get easily 3 hours, 4 hours. You know. So
all science,
yeah.
big.
But also the reason why we couldn't hide from him is because most of the guests who come on this podcast mention him.
Of course.
You know, most of this Kofi Beatman has mentioned him. You know,
Everyone.
Yeah, people
from Reggie to Talking Drums.
Exactly,
to
yeah.
Everybody
You know,
has mentioned him. Yeah.
So people mention him, and we are like, nah, it's about time that we have him.
Yep.
And of late, he's been going to the United States of America like it's from here to Kaswa, Charlie. But yeah, we don't need to introduce or give you his track record or what he does.
Resume speaks for itself.
Because we are going to talk about everything with him. He's a guy that, Charlie, if you go space, you have something to talk about.
Of course.
If you go as underground, you have something to talk about. So, ladies and gentlemen, this one we no go stress some. Help us welcome Panji Anoff, aka Overja.
Legend.
Yo, Panji, Charlie. Finally on the podcast. How do you feel?
Well, it's I've actually now watched quite a few of your podcasts, and I think they're always quite interesting. Sometimes very, very interesting. So I am proud, or I'm happy to be here. And also, I think I'm very proud of you as a human being, and I think this podcast is a perfect place for you to put together many of the things that you are very good at doing.
Shout. And also, I don't know, this is the first time you are meeting Fred, right?
Yeah, in person.
Yes,
First
in
time.
person,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, without Fred and with the rest of our crew, this wouldn't be possible. So shouts to the whole crew
Great
too.
honor for me, and well done. You know, teamwork.
Makes the dream work.
You know the same school. We're in the same school. St. Martin was me, him, and Mensa. We're in the same school. Yeah,
Dancer man.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, Panji. You once.
Anyway, let me say something about
Okay.
teamwork, which for me has really helped me as a human being. And it's that if two people come together, they achieve not 1 + 1, they achieve at least 5, or they achieve 7, or they achieve 10, or they achieve 20. And so it's important for us to understand as human beings in any society that 1 + 1 is not 2. As long as you believe 1 + 1 is 2, you will never work, you will never collaborate, you will never form a team, you will never come together. The moment we understand 1 + 1 is infinite, 1 + 1 can be 100. All we have to do is come together. You see, anytime two people come together, they achieve a lot, you know. And so it's why, you know, 1 + 1 is not 2. We need to understand that. That's so fundamental to the progress of humanity.
Yeah.
1 + 1 is not 2. You know, 1 + 1 is always something different. It's usually far, far greater than 2. So,
But-
you know,
but
I'm
also-
glad. So the two of you is like what you've achieved in this short space of
Yeah,
time.
but also we can't go and sit in an exam room and they ask us 1 + 1, then we'll say 3 or 4.
Well-
That one will go against us.
Or even 1 + 1 is 1. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, it's, you know, this podcast, I don't think I want to, you know, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, but I know you always have a lot of things to say about everything, and mostly you come across, you are mostly right. The last time that thing happened was when you came to my place and the mechanic was working on my car, and you came to check out what he was doing, and you said some things to him. Later, he called me. I was like, "Chai, who is that guy?" And everything he was saying was right. And I'm like, yes, that is Panji. He's an engineer. So he's like, but I'm like, nah, he's not your kind of engineer. He started to be a different kind of engineer, but he is well equipped with
Well-read.
info. Yeah, well read with everything.
Extensively.
But
Well, I'll say it comes from love. You know, I love cars. I love engines. I love mechanics. You know, I love our ability to harness energy. So, you know, take something as simple as a windmill or a water mill. We can harness a flowing river, or we can harness the flowing air to help us work. So for me, anything that is mechanical has always fascinated me. So I love cars, and so anytime I have a car, I try and understand as much about the car. If, you know, I'm a very annoying guy in a workshop, because if I'm with you, I'll ask you everything you are doing. And if you explain it to me, I'll be very grateful, you know. So I'm always trying to understand everything that I find around me. So I've always been curious, and my curiosity has always kept my mind busy. You know, I'm somebody, my mind needs to be busy all the time. I don't know, maybe nowadays, you know, recently I've been, you know, just watching Instagram, and Instagram started sending me a lot of messages about ADHD. I swear.
why? It also depends on. It also depends on what you were watching.
Maybe you know, just in the, you know, the algorithm.
Yeah,
You know,
So it depends on
So
what you were searching for.
I don't think I have ever searched for anything ADHD.
Anything
I
mental.
suspect it's the diversity of the things that he's looking at.
So, Fred, if you go to your explore page on Instagram right now, what do you see? I can tell you what I see. My explore page was first filled with models.
Yes, mine too.
Because I was looking at models, because you know photography.
Yeah,
Now my explore page is filled with motorcycles.
Really?
Yeah.
So maybe it's the diversity of the
Yeah.
things that Panji's looking at.
Yeah.
Instagram recognized me to be what they now call ADHD. You know, I guess I
have ADHD.
I believe, well, you see, the question is, if I remember I saw a report somewhere that said more than half of the children in America are now diagnosed as ADHD. So if 50% of human beings have a condition, is it then a condition or is it normality?
Yeah,
You know, so I think if we have an environment which diagnoses human curiosity and the activity of the human brain as ADHD, then then what they call ADHD, me I have well.
I think America has skewed the definition for monetary purposes in the educational system. But just from listening to your interviews and stuff, the kind of focused mind you have to express a lucid opinion about almost everything that you touch on, it cannot be attention deficit disorder. The definition is saying that you can't focus on one thing. And you are able to talk about a subject coherently for an extended period of time. So I don't know how they're diagnosing people, but it seems problematic to me anyway.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's look at the Instagram algorithm. It's so through the Instagram algorithm, and perhaps I guess, how quickly do you scroll past a video? So if I see something that sounds interesting, maybe I don't scroll past that video quickly. And then it made me, to some extent, realize what they are describing is something I recognize in myself, not as a disorder, but as a blessing. They describe traits and qualities, and I see them in myself, and why should this be a disorder? It's not a disorder. This is natural human curiosity. And for us to progress as a species, and unfortunately for us, the power we have puts the fate of many other species on this planet in our, excuse my French, fucking hands.
Yeah.
So it means we have far more responsibility than the rat that lives in this gutter outside. The rat that lives in this gutter outside isn't holding the destiny of a huge amount of this planet in their egos or in their foolishness or in their stupidity.
Yeah.
So we as human beings here, we have a huge responsibility. Perhaps I wish we didn't have it, but our power, and our blessing, which is our curse, which I think human beings, whatever idea we have, somehow manifests into this world. It just takes an idea. Look, it's Leonardo da Vinci's helicopter at that time seemed like madness to so many people. But the moment the idea of something that could take off vertically and land vertically, driven by a rotor in the center, once that idea entered one human being's head,
But was that Leonardo da Vinci's?
Well, Leonardo drew a primitive helicopter 500 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So it's, I'm not saying the first one, I'm just using that as an example of something which goes really far back. So what I'm saying is, we human beings as a species, to me, perhaps unlike any other species on this planet, the moment we think of something, it manifests. It just manifests.
I want to ask you something. How did you become this curious?
Kokonsa. Look, I saw a meme on online, like Twitter or something. Sorry, a cough. I have a cough. There were 5 women who were gathered on the street and they were talking, and the caption was high-speed 5G internet connection. Concert to the fullest. Yeah.
Well,
so back to Fred's question.
Well, yes, Kokonsa to some extent, also because I can't say I don't like Kokonsa, but to a great extent, if the conversation is about this person has done this person has done this, my mind switches off.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking about something else that's going to occupy my mind. So I can be in an environment, and if the conversation is interesting, I'm inside it 100%. If the conversation switches to other people, which, I think I can't spend my life in other people's business. Of course, sometimes it affects me in many ways, but there's lots of things that really don't affect me in any way at all, and I shouldn't spend my energy or waste my energy on them. So by not wasting my energy on those things, I have time to explore so many other things. So, so I've always been curious, and for me, I worked as a researcher in the days when I would sit in a dusty library for 1 week, searching for one article in a newspaper, which somebody told me they had seen somewhere as a child, or that they remember seeing this photograph in the newspaper, when they were 7 or 8 years old. And so that means I've got to work out how old they are and then go to the archives of that newspaper. And in England, where I was working at the time, sometimes you could go back 100 years to,
Wow.
to find that article. And
Just
then-
to find, just to search.
yeah, and so I've got it. He said I saw it when I was 7 or 8 years old, and this person is now 60 or 70. So now I look until I find it, and that was my job as a researcher. So when this is pre the internet, some primitive messaging existed within offices and stuff. So to live in a world now where I can find 100 sources of information about any question that enters my mind, and sometimes I have to filter through all 400 of them and still feel none of them are correct. So there's a huge amount of information, and sometimes there is information buttressing information, but because of the way information works, and this is the problem with the internet, that falsehoods get amplified as much as truths. This problem has always existed within academia. So if one person writes a university paper or dissertation saying that Mutombo was the first person to wear Vans and check shorts.
The funny thing is,
On a
that's
podcast.
crazy. I was actually looking at my socks and I picked the socks without looking at the shoe I was wearing. And it's all
really?
that, I swear you, like I was just looking at it. I'm like, oh, so dummy. I have dummy shoe and dummy.
So right, if somebody in the academic research writes Mutombo was the first to do that, anytime this question appears, people will go and do research and find this paper, and then they will cite it. And so academia has always amplified the existing truth, even though in some cases it has questioned it. But it's much harder to question the existing truth because precedents, just like our legal system, exist.
Yeah.
The internet, unfortunately for us, in many ways does precisely the same. And multiply that with a little bit of censorship, as we have seen in recent times, certain subject matters still evoke censorship. So the idea of the internet being this free place is also a myth. Yes, it is free to some extent, but if somebody can censor based on its misinformation or based on this is hate speech, do I believe in censorship? Yes, I do believe we must protect very young people from certain images, because especially, and I think we should protect young children from images of violence especially. So cartoons introduce children to violence at a very, very, very early age. So do I believe in censorship? Yeah, as for media, there's a lot of cartoons I would censor. So yes, I do believe in censorship, but I don't believe we can censor scientific debate. So I believe scientific debate should never ever be censored. So scientific debate, right? There's always many, many forms of research. So scientific debate should never ever be censored.
How about religious debates?
Well, I believe religion itself should be censored completely from society. In the absence of religion, the quality of humanity would improve overnight.
Really?
100%.
Why? Because religion, let's take Christianity for example.
No, we should never isolate one.
Okay, so we should gather all together. Me, I'm so
let's say
familiar with Christianity. That's why
evangelical religions in particular should be censored.
Okay.
So it's information. If we see information as propaganda, right? It should be available to those looking for it. But anything that is not scientific, you understand what I mean, or anything that is not evidence-based should not be promoted as such. If something is not evidence-based, then we must promote it as propaganda. And propaganda should not be, and propaganda should be censored, yes. Let's put it in that, so. However, what I'm saying is scientific research, people looking for the truth about anything should not be censored when they find out what their research happens to be. And this, in my lifetime, I have seen this cycle twice.
Yeah.
Or, well, multiple times in multiple fields.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in the censorship of scientific research. And and I don't believe scientists should be witch hunted for opposing the popular scientific beliefs if their scientific research shows what they are saying is at least as obviously true as
Any other
yes, I mean,
hypothesis
and we've
out
got to
there.
understand that for a long time, people thought the world was flat, right?
Kyrie.
Or in fact, let's say some people thought the world was flat. So, for instance, Vasco da Gama, Amerigo Vespucci, Christopher Columbus, they all followed the coastline from Europe to West Africa, and then they came to find crew navigators who took them across the Atlantic to the New World. So if you believe the world is flat, you can't sail across the ocean. But the West African sailors who had been going across the Atlantic for, hundreds of years, knew how to sail across the Atlantic to the New World, as the Europeans called it. To us, it wasn't the New World. We had been going there for hundreds of years. So all the great navigators, or the so-called
Don
navigators,
Diego de Azambuja.
yes, Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, who we were taught to idolize when
Get the
we were,
question.
From us.
no, when we were in primary school, we were told that these were the great navigators. Nobody told us that so-called fishermen is who took them across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And in America, there's this huge debate about, that they are foundational Black Americans. And see, the reason why this entire debate exists is simply because we don't understand that we Africans took the Europeans to the Americas. So of course we were there already. Look, recently the Mexican government has come out to acknowledge the huge presence of Africans going back hundreds of years, long before they are, you understand what I mean? So America is exactly the same. So of course all the blacks in America, or all the Africans in America, didn't get there through slavery. Some of them were before slavery began. Some of them were there long before the Europeans even came. You know what I mean? This is what has been fudged out of history because it was very convenient. However, if we understand that, of course, Africans were in the New World long before we ever took the Europeans there, because the first Europeans to reach the New World were taken there by African sailors. That's why when you watch Asterix and Obelix, you'll see that there is a, when you read Asterix and Obelix, you'll see that the navigator, the guy right in the top of the ship, is always some black guy with huge lips and bones and things. Even though it's a racial joke, it actually represents
History.
a factual reality. Yes.
Yeah.
So, has your ship got a crew? Is a question somebody will ask before they board a ship.
Yeah.
Because the crew fishermen, what we call crew fishermen, they were the navigators. They were the only ones who could take you across the Atlantic. So the word crew is a real word. It's a crew fish, what we call the crew fishermen. They also brought guitar to Ghana. So the crew are serious. I mean, it's just like the.
No,
See, it's back. Hold on.
Yeah, it come.
It's gone. So just like we say the Ghana fishermen, you find them in Cameroon, you find them in Liberia, you find them in Sierra Leone. The crew are also the same. So they had travel up and down, but they were famous for for navigating across the Atlantic. So, it's because history has been so distorted, Africans today and the Africans who went to America of their own free will, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and then the Africans who went to America, not of their own free will over the last 500 years, and then the Africans who went to America of their own free will in the last 50 years, 60, 70 years, the Africans who went to America from the Caribbean in the last 50, 60, 70 years. We now see each other as adversaries on different teams. When actually, man, it's the same people. You know what I mean? It's okay, we are all in America now. Charlie, some of us came of our own free will, some of us didn't. You know, some of us came of our own free will hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and you know what I mean? Unfortunately, we also got our freedoms and liberties taken away from us.
I'm still now even deeper into what have you. So I have two questions. I want to get an answer to: have you always been this curious, and have you thought about actually being an educator?
It's kind of curious side.
Because I want to know where it started from. I'm very interested in knowing how he became this curious, if he's always been this curious, and if he's thought about being an educator.
So before there was the internet, there was books. So there were books in my house. I would go to Burma Camp Library and borrow books. So I grew up in Burma Camp. My father was an army officer. He was also a pediatrician, so a children's doctor. So even though the army was in him small, I guess he was, compared to many of my friends' fathers, he was not a very military man at all. So, but, you know, I understand, you know, the military barracks is a very interesting place, especially during my era, when for a long time the military was actually in power. Military was in government, you know. But for me, one of the greatest travesties of humanity is that we identify a group of young men and women, and we teach them to kill people, and we think it is going to be of benefit to our society somehow. You know, it's a very strange thought for societies to communally do on such a large scale. I do agree, you know, that there are human beings in societies who, for want of, to describe it in a crude way, they are bloodthirsty human beings. They exist. I know some. I love some of them. However, I think those individuals should be made into an obrafo. So early on, at the age 12, 15, 16, you identify this person, you make them an obrafo. That means as a society, we promise you that one day, when we need to kill someone, we will give you that job, and you will kill somebody and get away with it scot-free. And this, and that thought can keep them
At bay.
At bay, yes, and ready when required, you know. So I think we have to harness all the energies that exist within a society. There will always be diversity in society, you know, but we've got to think of how to harness it, and we've got to try and maintain a balance.
What
you know,
do you
can't
think
have a
about
society where 99 of the people are obrafo, you know.
But
we need
armies, aren't armies like a consequence of conflict, natural conflict between different communities, different societies?
Well, so are we as a species not advanced enough to say, man, you know, let's try and put an end to human conflict? You know, there is nobody who would vote for conflict. No human being. So if we are a democracy, who is voting for all this conflict that we are seeing? You know, so I believe that if we really were in a democracy and we put it to a vote, you know, do we vote for no more conflict in this world? I am pretty sure it would be the majority. So proof of the fact that we are not living in a democracy is the fact that the vast majority of us human beings do not believe in conflict, but we are in a world full of conflict. So who is voting for the conflict?
Yeah.
Military
talking. Let me take a detour a little bit. Talking about like what you were talking about earlier about the fishermen who were the actual crew, like and all that. There was a time that and I heard it from my sources, and I think have you told me this before? You once flew into Ghana on, a cargo plane, a French cargo plane, and that's so strange to me. Like, how did it happen? You came to Ghana without a visa and without anything. How did that happen?
The time I came to Ghana without a passport, at that time, that was a commercial airliner. I came with
How?
British Airways.
Without a passport?
I didn't have a passport.
No ID.
I did have an ID card. I had, at that time, I was working for the BBC and I had a BBC ID card. So I used that to leave the United Kingdom and I used it to come back. But when I came to Ghana, I explained to them that, I did not have a passport. But I mean, I'm a Ghanaian, and I can prove it, and I'm actually coming. I need to get it renewed, but.
So was the French cargo plane?
No, that was not the French cargo plane. There, I had passport. I had.
Okay, so
I had all my papers. I had everything.
Was it a free ride?
Yes, that one.
You didn't want to pay.
I flew cargo planes multiple times.
Really?
Many times.
And they were all free.
Well, I mean. Yeah, I mean it's
stowaway to a certain degree.
No, it's not stowaway. You see, on every cargo plane, they have what they call jump seats. So they are two tiny seats to take up as little space as possible, and the cargo fills up the rest of the plane. So those jump seats are usually because the plane will fly and the crew will change. And a different crew will fly back. But sometimes there's extra crew who want to fly from one location to the other.
Yeah.
So they have these tiny extra seats in every cargo plane.
Yeah.
So if you have a friend who's in the cargo business, but that one you do need to have legitimate papers.
Yeah.
Even though in those days, we are going back 20, 30 years, very often you would arrive in a cargo airport and there is nobody and nothing there. So it's because, crew, it's like ships, the people who work on ships, sometimes they don't have any kind of document. They have no passport, they have nothing. They just have a ship's book or whatever they call it. And that allows you to disembark, travel everywhere, come back board onto the ship. So at that time, I used my staff card. And, to be fair to the BBC, they are a hugely powerful organization. So for a brief period in my life, I was able to use that power to acquire a lot of knowledge and information.
You harnessed that power.
I harnessed it. So, that was
to your advantage.
Well, and I also did a good job working for them. I did the best that I could. In every environment I find myself, I will really, really do my best to do the best that I can because I think I owe it to...
So what were you doing for the BBC?
Well, actually, I got... a scholarship. It was a scholarship which was specifically created to honor a very revolutionary black journalist who worked for the BBC. His name was Martin Shaw King. So he was a great guy.
No. Yeah. Did you know him?
I met him. But what made his work very interesting is that at a time when the BBC were really not interested in, or they were giving him very little support to cover the phenomenon that was hip-hop. And so the underground movement.
Okay.
So he did a lot of work to make sure that the BBC had certain archive that by the early 90s had suddenly become very valuable, because the BBC now had interviews with certain huge hip-hop artists and the interviews had been at a time when perhaps no one had realized how important they were going to be. So a group of black journalists and the BBC came together to decide they were going to find one, young black journalist every year to train in the footsteps of Martin Shaw King. So someone who was progressive or someone who was radical, someone who might see the future. And I was chosen. So it was a scholarship. I could work, or I worked in as very many different BBC departments. So I wanted to work in live television. I wanted to work in radio drama. I wanted to work in the black programs unit, making the black programs. And I also wanted to work in local radio and, you know, do local news. So I worked in all those departments. So it was training. I would work in those departments either as a researcher, as a producer, as an assistant producer. And so, unfortunately, I was the first and last person to receive that award.
So you were the first?
I was the first, yes.
And you met him?
No, he was dead by the time I was given the award. But I had met him earlier because I was then a student, but I was interested in, you know, I've always been interested in the underground phenomena. And, you know, hip-hop was that at the time. And Charlie, hip-hop is what had the energy. You know, so, I mean, Charlie, I was into hip-hop long before I even left Ghana, you know, even though I was into, so, I mean, but let's say I moved to England in 1984, and hip-hop was, yes, it was there, you know, it was coming, it was growing, but it was still very much an underground phenomenon, which is why an organization like the BBC would completely have ignored it until it was too late to have the most important and most valuable archival material. So I can say, in my case, I was at the BBC between 1991 and 1993. But let's say as my contribution to the future, you know, I interviewed some of the artists who were doing jungle and drum and bass because I could get them on a local radio program. And, you know, no one else's mind was on this thing was going to be as huge as a phenomenon just because they don't exist in the spaces where these things take place, you know. So every new phenomenon starts in some spot somewhere, you know what I mean? And if you're not part of that movement, you're just not going to know. So it's important, you know, journalism needs people who are on the fringes of every society, especially when it comes to the Western world, people who are on the fringes where black culture is concerned, because black culture is always a pioneer, and it's just again and again and again and again and again and again.
So are you doing this? Is your career path right now, right? Or was it steered by Martin Shaw King?
Well, I was a journalist before. I was working for a Nigerian publishing house called Concord Press. And before that, I had become really interested in journalism while I was a student. Partly, I must not lie, because being a journalist gets you free tickets to go to all the gigs.
To shows.
No, but, you know, you must be creative. I went to university right in the center of London, University College London. So a blessing because I was born in London, and therefore for me. But all around me were plenty of restaurants, and you know you are surrounded by 20,000 students. So being a journalist will also get you a free meal with a nice bottle of wine, you know. So it's businesses are always interested in good journalism about their venue. So it's not just coming to say, oh, I went there and the place was very nice. And in fact, you know, journalism is not, it's how do you create an image in the person who is going to read this, because then it was writing, you know. Now you have the power of video and other things, but how do you tell the story to someone who is not here? You know, for me, that is, you know, and if you can do that well, so, I mean, that is how I got interested, because every time I went somewhere which I thought had a magic I could describe in my mind, I thought, oh, it would be good, you know, to tell someone how I felt about this place, so that if they seek that feeling, they can come here and maybe they will find it. So for me, telling a story is about trying to describe something so someone who is looking for that thing will find it within it. It's, for me, all art really is storytelling in a way. It doesn't matter. So it's how do we tell the story? How
Do you still practice journalism?
Well,
In a way.
yeah, well, the things that I love, even though I might not be actively writing at this point, actually I have been doing a little bit of writing because I'm working on a project with my old friend Rob Marriott, who shout outs to the one Tafari. And so it is a project that really looks at, our history from what we know, and in many ways, so many aspects of our history found themselves embraced or manifested into the 20th century by this phenomenon that is hip hop. You see, so hip hop really, for me, is sure we think of it in terms of the music, but really it was about a crew. It was about a really profound ideology where you have a collective of people. Some of them are graphic artists, some of them are dancers, some of them are record collectors, some of them are DJs, some of them are rappers. You understand? Some of them are clothing designers. So even if you look around, and when you put so many creative people together, you manage to create a really profound identity, because you have specialists who are exploring this energy in their own dimension. So I'm exploring the energy of hip hop in, as a beat maker. Somebody is exploring the energy of hip hop as a fashion designer. Hip hop has created a whole new way of writing letters. It's a font. There's a font you immediately, in fact, there are multiple fonts. There's bubble fonts you immediately identify as hip hop. There's square fonts you immediately identify as hip hop. There's graffiti you immediately identify as hip hop. So there are so many fonts that hip hop has even created, So it's, and hip life and Afro beats is also us taking that energy, So it's, and bringing the whole circle back together. And that is why Afrobeat is so powerful. And that's why it's so profound. Because everybody knows it already.
And that's the work that you're currently doing.
That's
right
what
now.
I'm doing, yes. That is, for me, that is quite important work at the moment, is to try and, it's to try and connect all of these elements back together for all of us. Because, when we create powerful tools and powerful forms of expression and powerful ways of gathering energy, we've got to try and keep the circle unbroken. It's got to keep going round. It's like everything, and so we've got to think of that movement. It's usually a circle, but it's a sine wave. You're turning. You've got to keep moving. So, but we've got to try and keep the circle together. So I think you see, hip hop is far bigger than music. I know we think of it in terms of music for the most part because it was so easy to commercialize hip hop. In the music part, it's music you can. But I think that it is, just like jazz reunited all African people in many ways, because if I speak to my father's generation or my grandfather's generation, as soon as they heard jazz, they knew it was for them.
Yeah.
Nobody had to play the music and say this. As soon as they heard jazz, they just started dancing. There was a lot of music that they had heard in school or in church. They have to explain to them that this and this and this. So let's say in terms of modern technology, the music that my father, who let's say was born in 1927 or 1930, 1931, Tell those days nobody knows. The age where you go help you where you they put for
Yeah.
your papers
your
inside.
papers inside.
Yeah. So, but so let's say in terms of global music that he was exposed to, one, it came from what you heard at home in the village. Then it comes from what you hear on the radio. When radios came, it comes from what you hear. So, or what you hear in church, what you hear in school. So jazz was very, 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 very different for them when they heard it, and they identified with it immediately. So jazz is one, and when you think about jazz, there's a whole renaissance that came with it. It cuts across all the spheres. So I feel that this, and I mean, there are other really powerful ones like reggae. Reggae came from this tiny island in the Caribbean, but it was so powerful. There is no country in the world that doesn't have a reggae band, I don't believe. Yeah. Obiara yebi. Yes. So what is it about reggae that made it so universal? That somewhere in every country in the world, there's somebody that heard reggae and felt so strongly about it that, yes, they want to do some. And hip-hop and rap and the whole culture, too, has the same impact. You know what I mean? So these are phenomena that come along. It's sure there are others. There's rock and roll. There have been many phenomena that have totally transformed the entire environment. But it is in our interest to try and make sense, of what is happening so that we can actually make good use of it. So for me, that part, it's not, and we've also got to stop the phenomena where everything is, we leave it and the analysis or, the understanding or the misunderstanding becomes the norm or the narrative. We understand this phenomenon. So, I mean, Rob has always told the story. I mean, but, I think we do have to tackle the narrative and the global family, that is us and where we are going.
With your journalistic background, writer, what amount of responsibility do you feel towards documenting, archiving the genre? Because obviously your experience, most people who know of you would associate you strongly with the genesis of hip life, but your work precedes that, and it goes into hip hop and all of that, and you have all this wealth of information. Have you thought about how, especially this, because where I'm coming from is Mutombo made an introduction to me of Professor Collins, and he's documented up until a point high life and whatnot. In a similar vein, my perspective, limited as it is that you are standing in that gap where I don't know if Professor Collins is crossing over into where you may have picked up and know it so fundamentally and so well that you could be, providing that archival or documenting, piece for our culture as we know it. As you said, it's not just the music, it's so many things that's going on, and I think it's vital information. Have you ever thought about work in that direction?
Well, I have thought about it, especially because sometimes, especially in the area of hip life, I think the people who have documented it have often known very little about it, and it is good that the story starts getting told, but I think, like you said, it's far more important that we tell the story. It's not the responsibility of somebody to come from Japan to come and document our high life history. I always say how grateful I am personally to John Collins that he has documented high life, because, some people don't know John Collins, but John Collins has actually been on tour with guitar band High Life, playing villages, concert party, you understand? So it's not, he understands High Life to the core, so he's perfectly positioned. Me too, I've been on tour with concert party, but as a roadie, not as a guitarist. John Collins was on stage, you understand, performing with, so his documentation is based on experience. So I'm grateful that someone with his academic and writing ability, has, and it is his language. So when telling the story requires the English language, we were blessed that we got somebody whose language is actually English.
Yeah.
Me too, I was born in London, so me too, my language is English. Even though I've lived in Ghana for most of my life and I speak other languages, the language that you first hear when you are born here, you understand?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a second language to you, which is why, I feel Pidgin is so important, because it gives us the freedom to constantly redefine how we communicate. And how we wish to communicate is something which must evolve constantly. Language can't be fixed in space and time because feelings are not fixed in space and time. Terms and conditions are not fixed in space and time. However, I am as comfortable in English as I am in Pidgin. But for someone for whom English is not your first language, you are always going to be most comfortable in Pidgin, which is closer to your first language because of the environment you live in. You understand what I mean? So for me, Pidgin is about is the power of creativity in the language around us, that we are not bound. So if I say de, you can't tell me it's wrong. Who are you to tell me it's wrong? Whose pronunciation of de makes my de wrong or right? You understand what I mean? It's such a waste of our energies. So long as you can understand what I'm saying, then language has served its purpose. It's also why, yes, I've spent a lot of my life learning how to write, but I don't feel that writing is really a great way of, yes, I've tried to master expressing my feelings with words on a piece of paper, but I think the medium itself is fundamentally flawed. And no matter how much I have tried to be able to communicate what I feel with pen and paper or a typewriter and A4 or a laptop or a computer, I think the best way is what we have now, which is this. If I really want to tell somebody something, this is closer. But in order for me to tell somebody something, I want to sit down with them and so we can communicate. And so when I'm telling you, you can feel what I'm feeling. So maybe the way in which I say what I'm saying is odd, but the energy which you will feel me emanating will help you to understand what I'm saying. That is also a powerful thing in the Pidgin language. If you ask me something, Chale Panji, what they go, and I go talk, say, So before I say any words, I have told you the overall vibe or the feeling or the this. If I say, hey, then, so before I start the question, before I start to answer, I first tell you the energy. I tell you the feeling. And I don't even have to use any word. I just have to use a sound. So if I say, then you prepare yourself for what I'm going to say next. Yeah. If I say, hey, you prepare yourself for what I'm going to say next. If I laugh, you prepare yourself for. So it's putting the emotion at the beginning of the sentence, unlike putting it at the end with an exclamation mark or a question mark.
Yeah.
Even though your eyes scan to try and read the emotion as you read the question, the form is flawed. That exclamation mark needs to come at the beginning of what you are writing. then if I was writing, I would feel. But for now, so maybe, and let me not lie, I've thought about it. Okay, do I write in a way that I'll put my exclamation marks at the beginning of the sentence,
Right.
which is much closer to the way in which I express myself? But I mean, I think for me, the greatest form of expression is to sit down with somebody. So we need to be in the same space so we can feel each other's energy. And
For
we-
the academic purpose of learning the history and all that, how do we get to mine your brain for everything that is experienced, knows, lived through, without, before you process the way in which you want to do it for us, because we need it.
Well, for everything that I know is freely available to the people who help me in my life. So the people who help me in my life, they can ask me anything and anything, or they can ask me for anything or everything that I have. And I do think...
I thought you were going to say you do Zoom classes.
No, I mean...
Subscription fee.
In the same way that I said, 1 + 1 is infinity, I do want to do, I do want to explore what I think is our way of looking at what has happened over the last 500 years and stripping away the misinformation, It's, why don't we know that we took these great explorers to America? Why? Why is it, you can tell somebody, you can tell a Ghanaian, they say, hey, Tuli, you are lying. Why does the truth actually seem like a lie to so many of us? Because it's our cousins, it's our brothers and sisters who taught the Europeans to cross the Atlantic. Surely they should teach us that, and it's when we talk about going to the New World, I mean, we know that if Mansa Kanka Musa's older brother had not abdicated the throne, he went to South America. So he abdicated. He went to South America once, they say with 400 ships, came back, told his brother, Charlie, the New World, there they be you. So Charlie, you take over here. And I'm gone. And he went back. He took 1,000 ships packed with many things. He went to South America and he never came back. People say, oh, him and all 1,000 ships were lost at sea. Really? Come on. You can't tell me 1,000 ships left West African coast and all 1,000 of them got lost. When sometimes even fishermen from Senegal get lost and end up in Brazil and Barbados. Mm-hmm. The currents take you across if it's the right time of the year. So people have known this. They know how to go there and come back. You harness the ocean currents. So Mansa Kanka Musa's Abu Bakr went to South America, never came back. 1,000 ships. How many people were in that ship? Maybe that's 100,000 people, could be.
Yeah.
So 100,000 Africans settled the New World 1,000 years ago, or close to 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and they went there out of their own free choice. Mansa Kanka Musa went the other way. So he too went back to where Musa brought us from in the first place. And I know, here's another thing. The man who led the people out from Mizraim, his name was Musa. His name wasn't Moses. Moses is a translation of his name. If you know his name is Musa, you know Musa is a West African name. It's not an Arabic name. It's a West African name. In fact, if you Google, in which country in the world is the name Musa most popular, you'll be surprised to find it's Ghana. And apart from Ghana, Burkina Faso, Mali. So if you follow the name Musa, where does the name Musa come from? Where does it go? So now if you associate the Exodus with Musa, rather than you associate the Exodus with Moses, you start to make connections with the tiny amount of, even a 5-year-old can work it out. You understand what I mean? So connections are really, truly important. It's, and what has happened is a lot of things have been written out of history. They still exist in oral history, even though they are disappearing fast. You know, our oral history is disappearing because we overnight decided that oral history has no value, and the only thing which has value is that which is in a book. Book no lie.
Yeah.
You know, this was an overnight decision. So,
As in the tradition is no longer practiced?
well, how did we maintain our history before?
Yeah, oral.
Yes, it was oral history.
Yeah,
Yes.
oral history.
So
The
what I'm saying
griots
is,
and stuff.
yeah, in 2 generations we've lost our oral history tradition.
Wow.
So our history of version, or our version of history, will disappear and be replaced with a written version of history.
Which is better, or?
I don't think so.
Really?
Are they taking from the oral history and putting it down on paper, or they're just ignoring?
They're just
Who is
ignoring
they? They is you and you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying
but I
to get
believe
you.
we can do it with a microphone.
Cool. Okay.
Why do we need to write it down for it to be valid?
Not to be valid, but for it to stick and stay, like for time.
So you
for
can have
eons.
access to
Yeah.
it.
No. That's ancient technology. It's like if you tell me the best way to preserve music is to write it down. I'll tell you it's a complete lie. The best way to preserve music is to record it. If I record the music, you will hear every nuance. If I write
but
it down,
music, that is music.
what's the
But this
difference?
is-
What's the difference between music and what I am saying? What I am saying contains intent, it contains emotion, it contains my feelings. The typewriter cannot capture any of those. So this microphone here is far more powerful than my pen.
To a certain extent. So
No,
let me give you-
not to a
I
certain
want to ask
extent.
you what you think about
No, what I'm
this.
saying is we must change our perspective of what is valuable. We need to get rid of this idea that the most valuable version of the story is the one that is written down. The most valuable version of the story is the one in which the emotion is unquestionable.
I'm not
in
talking about
which the
value. I'm talking
intent
about
is clear.
practicality.
Well, see, practically, right? Everybody has video on their phone all the time. How many people are holding a book all the time?
Even in the far out villages and stuff. For our people.
It's coming.
Yeah,
It's
now,
coming.
now I have my grandaunties in
They're all-
In the far out village, when you go and visit them, they don't tell you bring me a book. They say bring me a phone.
True.
yeah.
True.
So let's embrace. Let's harness what is inevitable, and let's not pretend it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, for me, in my perception, and my perception is limited by the space and time that I exist in. You know, if you were to have put me here exactly the same year, 100 years ago, what I would say and do would be totally different, because I would be, my feelings or my responses to certain things might be exactly the same, but my ability to think about them would be totally different.
Yeah.
So to me, with my limited understanding right here, right now, I feel that the video, I hope I'm alive in 20 years' time to watch this, because deep fakes might totally invalidate everything that I'm saying. But if deep fakes can do video and audio, then deep fakes can definitely do A, B, C, D. So it's, when am I most misquoted? When they show video of me, or when they write an article about me? It's much easier to misquote somebody when I asked Motombo what his favorite color is. He said it's pink, right? Because I wasn't there. But to find video of me saying my favorite color is pink
That's more apt. That's more.
Yes. So I don't think the truth is not that as of now, what was written by the typewriter is more accurate than what was recorded with a video camera, or what was recorded with a microphone.
Absolutely. I'm selfishly doing this to say, I think both what you're saying
Charlie, you guys need a water sponsor.
is very valid about the form of recording the history.
Shine your eye.
I think the selfish reason why I'm asking is I think both mediums can coexist along each other because I've been doing a lot of reading about you, trying to research stuff like that. And to me, I feel like a book about the culture, the history, and everything that you've experienced will lend itself to a more organized way of the presentation. This is also a good presentation and a valid form of the presentation. I'm thinking about younger people. Like when I was young, interested in hip hop, at the time, I didn't know of your existence, but you were doing like amazing things, in my opinion, because we talked to Talking Drums, and they said to me that it was a concert or some stage concert or whatever they performed at. They were at the brink of giving up, and here's this guy in the shadows, standing there as a hip hop fan / somebody who's involved in the arts itself, entertainment, pull them aside and say, hey, this is it. You're coming with me. Here's a wad of cash. You choose to come back or not. If you don't come back, the money stays with you. That's a legendary story in my mind as I'm hearing it, but it hasn't been documented on paper. So if Talking Drums doesn't come here to tell the story and you don't write a book and we're telling a story of hip life, I think that's such a vital happening that I've heard that story so many times in hip hop where somebody says, Diddy showed up and did this, or some other producer showed up and did this and pulled them out. You were like heavily invested in it, passionately invested in it. That perspective, I think on film is great, but on paper too, in terms of documentation where I can go to, like let's say Hip Life Museum comes up one day. I want to be able to go there so that the children that come after me, maybe 20 years from now, can read it and say, oh, there was a guy, Panji, who did X, Y, Z, and we're here today because of that. And that's why I keep harping on the idea of writing it down and documenting it. And it's selfish for me, but I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, I have to admit, in the last few months, I've been experimenting with speech to text. And even though it's not perfect,
accurate, yeah, I was going to say, is it accurate?
well, you have to train it. So what I've been doing is and I mean, this may seem very obvious, but I tried it and it really helps, or it really helped in my case. So what I do is I do text to speech, and every time it makes a mistake, I correct it quickly rather than going to the end before I edit. So as I'm going along, I see a word, it doesn't get the word. Once I correct it a few times, it will start getting that word right. So I have been, teaching my AI to
Chat GPT.
yes, so that I can write slightly quicker. Also, when I write, I go through it 2 or 3 times. So I tend to do a few re-edits. So I like to be able to write, randomly put down all my thoughts and then gather them in a slightly more coherent way. Because so sometimes being able to dictate. So now that I can dictate to my phone and then spend my energy and time editing and trying to, redact. So for me, editing is just about how can I say this as quickly as possible. When I speak with my mouth, I don't say things as quickly as I possibly can. But if I write it down, then I'm trying to really make it compact and condense and not say something twice. So as a human being, if I'm passionate about something, I'll always come back to it because... but if I'm writing something down, I agree with you. I think, the book still does have some function, but I think ultimately we should be evolving as a human being or as a species to demand more than words. You see, it's very easy to misinterpret words. You know, how many ways can I say, you know, you can say, I can write the same words, but I can say them in 100 different ways, you know, and so I think the way something is said is so important that, sure, we can try and do it with, you know, black and white letters and print on a piece of paper. But I still do think there is far more that you, and that is why I think podcasts are reaching audiences that books were not reaching. You know, it's why the whole idea of audiobooks came along. You know, audiobooks kind of came with the internet. It's like they were there before you could buy a cassette, but it didn't really pick on. But then the internet suddenly brought these, and audiobooks are a bigger thing now than they were a long time ago because, and people think audiobooks appeal to other people. It's always, audiobooks appeal to other people because, oh, they can't read very well or they are too lazy to read. But actually, it's not that. The audiobook contains a performance by another human being. So another human being is helping you into this story, into this book. So, sure, someone is helping you to read the book. That's a great thing. For me, the greatest thing about books is that whilst you're reading the book, you are only reading 1/10 of it. The other 90% is actually in your imagination.
Yeah.
So that is a wonderful thing if you are telling a story, or if it's a novel, or if it's fiction. But when it comes to a documentary, that's a very dangerous thing, because now the interpretation of the facts is... So for me, where I think this microphone is increasingly important is for documentation. It's not for storytelling. So if I were to write my experiences about, you know, the evolution that I've seen, you know, and for me, I'd write it as a story, you know. So it's a story. Sure, it will be factually accurate, but I'm not writing it because of the factual accuracy. I'm writing it because it's a story. And I actually myself think it's an interesting story. And for me personally, it's given me incredible faith in myself, because, you know, it's just like Leonardo da Vinci, you know, I'm going to make a helicopter and you just carry people up and down. You say, oh, man, you know, fuck this nigga, man, he's full of shit.
So,
you know? And you know, when and so when I started believing that at some point in the future, you know, this phenomenon that was hip hop, and it's not just music, you know, it's the energy, it's the attitude, it's the production ethic, you know, it's the digging back into the history that is Africa in the diaspora or Africa in the world. It's that is, you know, so it's not that I knew. I thought, man, it would be so powerful if it happens. You know, so I've always dreamed that it will happen, and now I see it, you know, and it's, Charlie, when you're in New York, it's, you know, it's, who doesn't love Afrobeats?
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe you can come up with the oral history of hip life, a combination of, so it will be a book, but then you've done it in the form that you're most a big fan of, because you want to do the oral microphoning of the history.
I need an editor.
Chai,
All right.
Chai. So we had Kwekuti and Abeku talking around here, and they spoke about you. We've had a couple of people who have mentioned your name and all that. I don't want to touch so much on your work with Abeku and Kwekuti, aka Talking Drum, because we've had them, and I want to talk about other artists that you discovered, that you worked for, and one of them is Kenaisoba. You discovered Kenaisoba.
Well, you see, I mean, I find the word discover very offensive.
Okay,
you know?
so
Isoba was a superstar long before I met him.
in his hometown, right?
Well, not even. I'm just saying in himself. You see, look at his name, Kinai Soba. You see, so it's if you meet somebody, and you know, he is an incredible performer, you know, but obviously, you know, he wasn't in the best place. He's still calling himself King Aisoba. You understand what I mean? So that means he, in his mind, you know, he knew he was a
It's a
superstar.
guru, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that.
Oh, when you met him, he was Ken Aisoba.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
King Aisoba.
yeah, he was
yeah.
in Aisoba. Yeah, okay, so... Okay,
Yeah,
so
that was his name. I mean, it's so. But what I'm saying is, okay. So when you say discover, I think you can maybe help him reach a bigger audience. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's important, maybe to, maybe it's important to, it's important to take music which I believe in. You know, I think, yes, I believe other people will like it too. Because I like it. You know, I don't know why I like it. I don't really care. But if I really, really like something, I in my spirit and my soul, believe that most people are actually like me. You know, they might, you know, a lot of people pretend they are not like me, and a lot of people are not like me. But I believe that most human beings in this world, they feel very, very similar to the way that I do. Doesn't matter whether they are in China or Japan or Argentina or Afghanistan or Togo or Benin or Mali. I feel that we human beings have so much in common, and I have so much faith in it, that if I myself really, really, really like something personally,
you think everybody else would
I
love it?
I don't think I believe.
You believe. So Kenai Soba was so different from every other, you know, musician during that time. You worked with him, and he went ahead to win the Ghana Music Awards, the best artist.
Yeah,
Or
at that time,
the song of the year.
yeah. So song of the year,
Yeah, the song of the year.
then became artist of the year. So
I want to see you, my father. You know, and
I
you.
think that year, I looked it up recently. You know, it's sad that I can't remember exactly, but I remember I looked it up, and that year he won either 3 or 4
Yeah,
awards.
yeah.
It
True.
was maybe album of the year, traditional song of the year, I
Yes.
think, maybe songwriter of the year, and
An artist. And
artist of song of the year, or the
yeah.
artist of the year. So
How, like, Kenai Soba was so different from every other person that you've worked with. Kenai Soba wasn't mainstream. His kind of music.
well, no,
it wasn't
no, no,
mainstream.
no. He wasn't different from any other artist I'd worked with, because when I work with Talking Drums, I don't know if they mentioned it, but Talking Drums, the work we did, like around 90 I think it was Christmas 93 to 94, we had a band, and the band was made up of a gourmet player for the bass,
Okay.
a kologo player for the music, and then a drummer.
Okay.
So the drummer, their normal Western jazz
Yeah,
drums.
but so mine, Kenai Soba's difference is the instrument he was playing.
Yeah, but that was the same instrument.
Yeah.
So that time it was Captain Yaba.
Okay,
So
Captain. Shout out to you, Captain.
Yeah. And at that time, I also knew Atongo Zimba from way before. So I met Atongo Zimba at the time. It's around the time I was either coming back from Nigeria, and there was a time when Atongo used to he used to play at the shrine before Fela came on stage. So I was such a big fan of Fela. It's that also made me interested in Atongo Zimba. So it's like, there's something in this instrument that if Fela says, no, this guy should open for me, yes, with this. So I've always liked the instrument myself. You know, it's, you hear echoes of it in the blues, you hear echoes of it in tenor guitar and reggae, you hear echoes of it in funk. You know, it's that it's that really, it repeats itself throughout Black Culture again and again and again. You hear people playing it on the piano in jazz, you know.
Yeah.
So it's that so it's a powerful element of African culture that has also kept remanifesting, in our art forms and in our music forms. So I was always interested in it. So through Atongo Zimba, through Captain Yaba. So when I met King Isoba, I had already spent more than 10 years learning how to record that instrument, learning how to combine it with other instruments. Yes, understanding the limitations, understanding the scales within which it operates. So, the thing which I think I've spent so much of my life learning, which I haven't really put to all that much use, is, the combination of traditional and modern instruments, So, I've done it to some extent.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you...
but it's, I hear it so often, and I feel, man, it can be done so much better. And it's just because very often we allow the Western instruments to bully our traditional instruments rather than allowing our traditional instruments to define the music,
Yeah. So what made you decide to work with King Isoba? Was it him, the artist, the musician, or the instrument that he was working with?
At the time I started working with Isoba, I was working with a few artists, and actually Isoba, I almost didn't work with him because the first person who introduced King Isoba to me, I won't mention names, no need, but the stories. There was some very, very, very hard work that I had done for him, and he never paid me the dough for that job.
Prayers for him to bring the dough.
And instead, he brought me something far more valuable.
Oh, okay.
Which was King Isoba. But
collateral.
However, I was blind to the fact that what he had come to introduce to me was far more valuable than the money that he still owed me. You know what I mean? But I told Isoba at the time, I think Isoba played me one song, and I was blown away, I have to admit. Because when I asked him to play me one song, the one song he played it as if he was standing in front of an audience of 100,000 people. And I say, hey, somebody who can turn this power or this engagement on just like that, yes, you are good. But I told him, man, the person who brought you to me is bad luck. So I'm sorry, but Charlie, I have to, I believe in energy, and the energy that brought you to me is bad energy. So, it shows don't be rigid in your ways. You've got to be flexible, So don't let ego and bad debts and things. Yeah. But then later, maybe a year later, someone else brought Isoba back to me.
Oh, wow.
To record some jingles for him.
It was meant to be.
Yes. And so on the second time round, my mind was more open, and, maybe I'd accepted that, Charlie, this money is never going to come. So
yeah, I might as well.
Yeah. So then I started working with Isoba. I realized he's, you see, I like people who can write songs. It's a song is a really beautiful thing. You can take maybe sometimes 20 words, and I can give you examples of songs which contain like less than 10 words.
I might always say this, Bob Marley's that Three Little Birds song.
Yes.
Yeah. Few words. And he kept on repeating it over and over again. And that song sounds full.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Shatta.
My name is Shatta Wale.
Yeah.
I was actually very impressed by that record.
Yeah.
It's a great record. I swear.
It's crazy.
A record like that, Ghetto by why am I forgetting?
Akon? Which Ghetto?
No, Ghetto. He's an R&B artist before Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye recorded his record. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway has a record called Ghetto.
Okay.
And it's the same way.
Ghetto.
Instrumental for like, in the ghetto.
Yeah.
And then the instrument starts like, it's like 15 minutes, bro. Yeah. It's like one of the wildest records. But yeah. Anyway.
Do you think songs with few words become hits?
I know the song. It's not Donny Hathaway, but it's some guy from the south, the ghetto. The ghetto, do. Isn't that the song?
Yeah.
The ghetto. It's not Donny Hathaway.
But then Donny has
Donny
a
Hathaway
version.
did the original?
Maybe.
Maybe his is the original.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
then I never. Okay, so let me look for his.
Panji, do you think songs with few words and songs with easy sing-along hooks can easily make hits?
I won't say songs with few words. But and I don't believe, a song has to be simple in order to be a hit. Any kind of song can be a hit, but is it memorable? Will I remember it the first time I hear it, and will I want to hear it again and again after that? So there are some songs, and you see, I think there are two things. One is the power of the song, and then another completely different thing is the power of the performance or the recording. So there can be a great song, but if we don't get a really great recording of that song, it's still not going to achieve its potential. Yeah. So it will achieve its potential, like wherever you go and play the song, people are going to like it. But you also need a good recording of a song in order to try and make some money from it. So, so what made me decide to work with Aisoba is I realized he was a great songwriter. Also, at the time, I had renamed the label Pigeon Music since way back in 1997. And I started working with Aisoba around 2000, 2001, actually. So even though I had changed the name like 5 years before, I still wasn't finding artists for whom Pigeon was so natural. But Aisoba was very clear in himself that however he spoke any language was perfect for his music. Maybe it's not perfect for Bob Marley or it's not perfect for Michael Jackson, but the way he speaks his English is perfect for his music. And as he pointed out to me very early on, is that there are many people for whom English is not their first language, who, if an American man comes to talk, or an English man comes to talk, they won't understand one word. But if you speak Pidgin, they will understand. So it's easier to understand Pidgin than it is to understand English. I'll be right back. It's a little hard to understand. I'll be back is easier. I dey go come is even easier to understand. So Pidgin is fantastic at communicating intent and feelings. Some languages are very good at communicating thought. Some languages are very good at communicating philosophy. But Pidgin is very good at communicating intent and feelings. So it's fantastic for music. Every language is slightly different in how its emphasis is. So, that is why for me, Pidgin is such an important thing. It gives you all this freedom, and it's also a fantastic tool to communicate through.
So, Panji, how was the feeling like the night? Because I guess you worked with Kenai Soba on that particular project. Yeah. And how was the feeling like when you won on that night? Like, how was the feeling like?
Well, I have to be very honest, and at that point in time, I had to gamble everything on one. And so, because it's expensive to market and promote an album properly, and so I decided I could market and promote one album properly, and in fact, I could market and promote one single properly. And everybody on my team, including King Aisoba, wanted us to use the song featuring Samini as a single, or the song featuring Sydney as a single, the song featuring Kontihine and Kwabena Kwabena.
Oh wow, he had tracks with all of these people.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
King Aisoba had tracks with all these artists on his first album. And I wanted to promote the song and that I hadn't even played a beat on. Because that song, I Want to See My Father, is just Aisoba and his Kologo. A little bit of backing vocals, but that's it. So, and everybody, excuse me, I guess everybody was afraid that, the song doesn't have a beat, the song doesn't have a feature, so it's not the song that we should promote. But I just had a lot of faith in the song, and I felt that song best projected King Aisoba's identity. And I say this, I love collabos, but if it's my last 5 CDs that I'm trying to use to promote Mutombo, believe you, Mutombo is the only thing you will see in that 5 CDs. Nobody else, not even me. I don't want to eat into the 5 CDs. I want every cent to go into Mutombo and Mutombo alone. So, you won't see me up dancing in your video,
No Diddy up in the video.
No, because I feel I'm stealing your shine, It's, and, sure, there are many ways of looking at the same thing, but at that point in time when, I just wanted to use as much of the screen time as possible to promote what I had put, what I'd gambled, because for a long time, perhaps, I was associated more with hip life or, hip hop. Some people knew me for reggae. Some people knew me for my work with Winneba Youth Choir. Some people knew me for my work with Kofi Ganaba. Some people.
Shout out to Kofi Ganaba.
Yes,
may he rest in peace.
Yes, the divine drummer.
Yeah.
It's his 100th anniversary this year.
Hey, Panji, there are so many things that we have to talk about with you, but I think time. So maybe, no, not maybe, you have to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to do a 2 or 3
Because
parts.
Kofi Ganaba, like Kiki Jan, you work with Kiki Jan.
Yes.
Like you've worked, like Ghana films back in the day,
Mac Tonto,
Mac Tonto.
I was really, really blessed to have these. You see, these are people who managed to cut through the noise and the glass ceiling way back when. Kofi Ganaba is the first African artist to record an album in America. So I know we obsess about firsts, but somebody has to do it before you realize it's possible. So and it's that there is African music which has a lot in common with the American music of the time. It's that we were always that similar in current expression, because no matter how African we are, there is also always a global frequency, and we are all tuned into that global frequency. So maybe it was jazz 100 years ago and it was something else, but for the last 50 years, it's been hip hop, and our various manifest and reggae, and dancehall. These are the 3 frequencies that have permeated everything that I have known in my lifetime. I'm 56 years old. I've been around for a long time. Sure, there was some funk in the beginning, but that reggae was always there. I know Bob Marley's music when I was 5 years old. There was Bob Marley and Jimmy Cliff, so, and there was our own African reggae to fire in Soweto, burning all my people, so. And you see, the reggae song I am singing, going back to the 70s, that was how we in Ghana found out about what was happening in South Africa. It was through music.
Yeah.
It's not the news channels, it's not this, it's being somewhere singing the song Fire in Soweto. That is how we resonate, and that's how we come to terms with what is happening in Soweto that is affecting our greater humanity. So through the music, we connect and relate with a very important social, political, and human event. But music is how we make it resonate amongst ourselves and beyond. So this, you think of music and you think of art, and sure, it's a wonderfully entertaining thing. But I think African music, in whatever form it has, what's the first hip-hop song you can think of? Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. The Message. Mm-hmm. The song is called The Message. So there's always been a message. So music is part of our oral history. Fire in Soweto is placing that event at a time relevant to all of us at any point in time in future. So what evokes, let's say, the shooting, or, what evokes what was happening in South Africa at the time? Music is part of it. Huma Sekela, Miriam Makeba, Sonny Okusun. So music is important for us, and it's important for the whole world. It's not just us. But music can't lose the message otherwise. And the message isn't always political. Sometimes the music is just how we are loving each other right now, or how we are fighting each other right now, or how we are engaging with each other. It's not, but it's still it's a tool for us to communicate and help to understand what's going on around us and what is happening and how, so it's a bigger thing. So how did I feel? I felt very, very happy for Isoba, and for myself, I just felt relief, because sure, I mean, those things, because, an award, for me, by the time you get an award, you've achieved most of what. Still, it's great, and thank you to Ghana Music Awards for acknowledging Isoba. In those days, it wasn't like SMS voting, carried. It was more, and sure that the song was a huge hit, and so he totally deserved it. But it was the first time a traditional song was winning.
It was crazy.
Song of the year.
Crazy.
So, and sometimes when I look back at it, I think, I was very, was I overconfident, or was I too arrogant to think that, a traditional song can enter the market and compete against the hip life, which was dominating at the time, and was that too big a gamble? Should I have played safe? But for me, the answer is, by then I was so sure that identity was more important, than style or format. And sure, it was a gamble, maybe in terms of me. My conviction was so strong that it's identity is what it is that we have to sell. Well, it's but no, it's also trial and error and wasting money and spending.
So gamble, it was basically a gamble.
Yes, well, I don't feel it was a gamble because I was very sure, but I was the only one who was sure. But there are people around me who were not sure. So should I have listened to them? You see, there's times when,
because he had songs with Samini, Konti Hine, Sydney,
all big,
and they were all big
superstars
around
at
that
the
time.
Yeah.
So
Kwabena. Yeah. And
so for me, it was like intuition paired with gamble.
Well,
shouts to your Miami Nights. Las Vegas Nights.
My brother, Mr. Robert Field, now based in United States, or still based in United States. Well, it's. I do think. In a case like this, I think if I had enough words to explain to the people around me why I thought identity was more important than remaining within the format of the time, because his song with Sydney is kind of like, it's kind of like it's kind of music of the time.
Yeah.
So why would I gamble, something which is in the vein of everything that is happening for something which sells identity?
Yeah.
And if I could have explained to them why my conviction was so strong, they would all have understood.
Yeah.
So, but this is an example of a time when I shouldn't listen to everybody around me.
Yeah.
And there's also plenty of examples when, you should listen to the people around you. So I think it depends on, ultimately, we human beings are going to be responsible for ourselves because we decide when to and when not to take advice. The advice is always there. A lot of the advice has good intentions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time, the advice is good for every industry except the one I am in. Because the industry that I am in, what is so important is not to be the same, but is to provide something fresh and new. So if you are a doctor, for instance, the best way to be successful is to be good at what everybody thinks being a doctor is. So Charlie, it's like you want to, not only you want to be in the center of the lane. However, when it comes to art, Charlie, the center is choked. So you have to find some fast track down one of the sides so that you can speed down the side, and all of a sudden, before everybody realizes, you're up in the front. You understand what I mean? So so sometimes you hear very good intentioned advice from people who are not artists, and the advice is very valid in their industries, but in your industry, it's bogus and fraudulent. And I think that is why sometimes a society truly advances when the connection between finance and art is made. Usually you see it through advertising. Earlier we were talking about hip-hop. Look at how hip-hop transformed advertising. Every kind of advertising changed to embrace something, right? So what you have now is let's say the mainstream or the sensible money is investing in the art which is on the fringes, and by so doing, bringing it into the mainstream. So to me, that is where, things actually happen. But you don't want to be, so Charlie, sometimes I take advice, sometimes I don't. And now, as I get older, I take advice more and more and more.
Because we see who said you are there. You have to listen to the youngins.
Yeah. So no, it has nothing to do with age at all.
Really?
No.
So why has that changed?
I've always listened to sensible advice from anybody.
Okay.
Old, young. I learned so much from children, because children, they will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So not only my own children, but I'm sure you, Mutombo, you've noticed, it's like if we are somewhere and they are children, me, I can, even before I had my own children, you see, it's like I'll engage with the children a lot, because I know it's going to be, children are very immediate, and less preconceptions, even though there are some. One thing I found very strange going back is, I'm sure Mutombo knows my friend Burning Rock. Anywhere Burning Rock and I would go, when we went to rural areas, the children would come, Rasta, Rasta. So little children have always been fascinated and drawn to these strange Rastas who come. It's like, there's something instinctive when children see grown-ups with plenty hair, in environments where they will come, hey, Rasta, 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 Rasta. So that made me interested in this phenomenon. It's like, why are children drawn to plenty hair? What is it? It's like almost instinctive. There is something that, whether it takes the form of Afro, there is something that, so that's why I grow my hair,
So Fred, we have to have Panji here again. Like very soon.
It's an interesting
because
question.
Panji, like one topic that we wanted to talk about was family. That's what Fred was like, family and, kids, having kids and all sort of things. But You know, we know, like I said at the beginning, with you, there are 3 questions per it will change.
No, and you know, family is a big thing.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I don't think we should ever limit family to genetics.
Genetics,
But
yeah.
Yes, we will make family as we progress through life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important to see those people that you have an affinity for.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are family.
I always tell, you know, my family that for me, right, friends are family to me.
Yeah.
Because I lost my family at a very young age. So wherever I am right now, it's through people I met. Panji Anoff, like I always tell, like that my family will tell you that if I have $1 million right now, right, and it's down that one person who should benefit from that 1 million is Panji Anoff. No
Amen,
doubt.
amen,
no,
amen.
no
Yeah,
doubt
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
amen.
Because he gave me links, he gave me opportunities, he gave me a home, right? When I was in my house and I was bored, I was looking at my 4 walls and I would drive all the way to his house, and Panji's home is my home, not was.
Yeah,
It's
is,
still my home.
yes.
I can walk in, go to the kitchen and do whatever I like. So, you know, it is down that one person that I'll never ever forget is
Panji.
this man, you know, and my family knows. Like it is like, you know.
That's dope.
So
Amen,
anytime
amen. God bless.
I'm mentioning Panji's name in the house, everybody keeps quiet. Yeah, because I've said it. It is down, you know.
That's dope. It's a question that I want to tie 2 things together.
Last
because,
question, though.
Yes. You were talking about Ayisoba, and you said something that was profound to me. Identity being more important than style in the context in which you were talking about
Yeah.
it. And I'm also thinking of you as the one who introduced talking drums to us, young people, as the world. And when I was in my consumption of talking drums, one of the things that stood out to me the most that now that I'm listening to you, I'm figuring out that you managed somehow to combine the idea of style and identity so well in talking drums, as you were talking about Yusuba, and I wanted to ask you about that when we were at the kitchen before. It's this thing, style. Talking drums came on the scene with a batakari and over a hoodie. And you walking here in a batakari.
And you know, a few weeks ago, when it was a little colder in New York, I was wearing exactly that, a hoodie and a batakari.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, Talking Drums and I were walking around, you know, Manhattan exactly 28 years ago in this same batakari and hoodie. And Charlie, it still works.
I have a picture here which I'll share on our Instagram page.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in speaking of identity, you, at least for me as a young hip hop consumer at the time, I was listening to hip hop, like all kinds of artists. But when I experienced Talking Drums, I identified with them because I saw the batakari. I'm like, these boys are from here, and they're speaking in a language that I understand. So my question to you is, have you always strongly associated identity with the arts?
Always.
In terms of what you...
That one, the
you
answer
want
I
to-
can answer for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
And whose idea was it to do the batakari thing? I always wanted to know. They didn't seem to remember when I asked them.
Well, I don't. I've always worn batakaris as long as I can remember. And when I started working with Talking Drums, I think I gave them some of my batakaris.
Okay.
Maybe for a video shoot or for a photo shoot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because the video that's on YouTube, that's what they're wearing.
but no, I mean, before that, even for performances, but I do believe if they hadn't worn like the oversized batakaris, which were big enough to cover the hoodie, let's say, they had worn other indigenous clothes, you know, and You know, it's one thing we forget too, that when hip life actually started out, we had got a lot of the identity right. You know, I remember NFL, they used to have this shred, they would paint their bodies with shred and paint their faces, and tell you it was dope. You know, anybody who saw that video, you know, or saw those images and the way face and body paint transforms your, you know, persona and your identity, you know. And it's, you know, in the early times of hip life, we had started to capture all these things, but then somewhere along the line, we lost track and just started imitating everything American, you know, and that's when, you know, I lost interest in hip life to a great extent. It's because, you know, I didn't think the point of hip life was to, you know, imitate what America was doing. It was to go above and beyond and far. You know, we are blessed to still have the source of what has led to this global explosion. So we can explore things from, you know, it's like we can go from the beginning straight to the end. You know, we can shortcut 500 years. It's a very powerful place to be, and we are blessed. We are really lucky. So, I mean, for me, it was always about, yes, what contribution are we making to the global dialogue if we do not connect our experience to the experience that America has marketed to the world for the last 100 years. Because for the last 100 years, America has sold the world African-American culture. Maybe not quite 100, but almost. I mean, rock and roll, you know, ghetto music. Everything. Rock and roll, you're going back to the 50s. So, okay, 75 years, for the last 75 years. And, you know, it's not like Louis Armstrong and Nat King Cole. Charlie, you can go back. That was what they could sell to the rest of the world. You know, in Ghana, we knew Louis Armstrong. There's plenty of American artists we never heard of, but the ones that are relevant to us, dear, we know them and we know them well. You know, Nkrumah was a good friend with Louis Armstrong. He's made him know that, Charlie, listen, they love your music back home where I come from. You know, one day I'm going to bring you out there and you'll see how much we love your music, and then you'll know who we are. It's like, we love your music so much. We understand your music. You don't have to explain anything to us. Just play now, we'll start dancing. You know, so, you know, that connection is important, really. So, I mean, for me, that, yes, and identity is important because identity is also about honesty. You know, if as an artist, you can't be honest with yourself, if you can't face your fears, then you are not really going to bring anything new to the table. The only thing you can guarantee is new is what you are experiencing, because it's unique to you. Anybody else will experience it something in a slightly different way, but your way might be relevant to them. And I do believe in that universality. So if I want to create something truly original, then I have got to create exactly what I felt. And then I'll know that, yes, it may be universal, but it's also unique to me. So identity is part of truth. And for me, art, you know, what is the truth? What is a lie? Yes, we can't get into that. But it's being true to yourself and being honest with yourself helps you to become a much greater artist.
Definitely.
I think One Love has, in terms of how he has influenced, you know, all the artists that have come behind him, is in enabling them to realize that, you know, actually, you can be truthful and honest and use it to create wonderful art. You know, you don't have to fake it to make it. You know, you can be genuinely honest in your intention and your in your feelings, and other people will resonate with it. So it influences, you know.
Awesome.
Dope. Charlie, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I knew that we were going to ask Panji 3.5 questions. And that's exactly what happened. So, by popular request,
Yes.
we are going to call on him again very soon because Chai, we have so many things to. Panji is a strong Nkrumahist.
Yeah,
100%, yes.
Yeah, Panji, Panji is always talking passionately about Muammar al-Gaddafi.
Pan-Africanism is...
Yes,
I had so many questions I wanted to talk to him about Pan-Africanism and all that.
We can't.
Well,
Yeah, I know. But that's why we have to come back.
I
It's so
advise
painful. We can't
every
do
young
it.
person watching, go and check out what is happening in Mali and Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
And it is making us aware of possibilities. Life is about possibilities, So we must keep these dreams and these possibilities alive.
Yeah.
We've seen many dreams snuffed out. You mentioned people who, we've got to overcome the critical mass that allows Nkrumah, Sankara, and Gaddafi, Kagame to thrive.
Yeah.
We must enable the environment that allows them to thrive. Nobody's going to do it for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on that note,
There you have it.
full scap. This don't be no thread. This be full scap.
Yeah.
Charlie, Fred, how you see the conversation?
Man, I have so many more questions. It's been thrilling,
same.
though. Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't even pull my phone, like the notes on my phone this time around.
Yeah,
Because,
we didn't prepare for this because we've been preparing for you for a long time.
Yeah.
We've been talking about
but
this.
even if you prepare, you can't defeat Panji.
Not even preparation for defeat, but the span of things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
We have to
Charlie,
do
can't.
minimum
Segments.
second.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
minimum
easy.
second.
Yeah,
Because there's so
segment,
many
Charlie.
different
Listen,
things.
But Charlie-
and one ADHD.
Yeah. But Charlie, it was still filled with gems. Like,
Of course.
so many gems.
So many,
Yeah.
so many.
Charlie,
Pretty dope.
Guys, Charlie, as you know, by our usual sign off, Charlie, do like, do subscribe, and do share. The F more Let's Divide. Fred,
Yes, sir.
we are through.